Hello data people. In today's video I'll show you how to install Leyline IO on Linux. So I have a Linux machine here, squeaky clean, nothing installed. This is the Ubuntu version of Linux, but use any Linux you want really. So as a first step we'll have to install a library. And by the way, let's take a look at our documentation website, which you can find in opening your browser, doc.leyline.io. Head over there, and here under Quick Start, you can find all the instructions for a full local installation here, and it tells you how to install on Windows, Mac OS, and on Linux. So this is what I was looking for. This instruction here, apt-get install, installs this libfree type 6 library, and on CentOS you just install yum install free type. So let me just copy this, go back to my terminal here, and install this libfree type 6. Oh, sorry. First, in my case, I have to become root first, so I have the sufficient privileges to do this. So I'm doing this first, and then now I will install this. So that's installed. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get the actual installer. So we head back to the web browser, go over to leyline.io, and here on the top right you can see a button free download, and then on the page that comes up you can see all the different installers for the different architectures. Here are all preset to the latest release, which in our case is 2.11. If you want to install an earlier release, you can pick here from the drop-down version, but usually you just install the latest release. So in my case, I'm installing Linux on an ARM architecture. So here, I don't click download because I don't really want to download it from the website, but I want to download it inside my terminal. So I right-click here and just copy the link. Then I head back over to the terminal, and here I use curl-o and just insert the link which we just copied from the website. So this should take about a minute to download. It's about 450 megs in total, which by the way is the complete installation, so it's not just a part of Leyline IO, it's everything. Really, there's no restrictions whatsoever. It's the same version that our smaller customers are using as our very large enterprise customers are using. So you're all set if you have this version. Any case, that's the only version there is. So almost done for 13, 25, 35, 42. Okay. So let's check what we downloaded here. Oops. Where are we? Oh, I should go back. I should go back to, I actually downloaded into the wrong directory, but it doesn't matter now. So I'll just check this here. This is what we downloaded. And let me just move this, because I didn't want to download it over here, but move this to the to my root user directory, really. Okay, so I'm now in my root user directory. Let's check what we have here. Here's the version that we just downloaded, the installer. So now I have to changemod X this, so make it an executable first, or otherwise we cannot execute it. So changemod plus X Leyline. Okay, and now just invoke the installer like so. Okay, this starts the installation process. It will ask you a few questions, such as do you want to install it? Obviously, we hit enter. Where should it be installed? The default directory is opt Leyline. And now it asks you for a few default ports, communication ports. First one is for the configuration server on the actual REST server, which the defaults to 5841. Then for the reactive engine 5842, and for the reactive engine PECO ports, which are the ports that are used to communicate amongst the reactive engines in the reactive cluster 5843 is the default here. You can change them here, or you can always change them later. If should these ports collide with any of the ports that you're already running on your installation, on your machine rather, usually that's not the case, or maybe 5841 isn't your lucky number, so you want to change it because of that. But either change it now or change it later in the configuration file. For now, I'll just accept the defaults. Create symbolic links. Yes, I'll do that. So that will create a symbolic link for the configuration server and the reactive engine. And where do I want to have the symbolic links? Defaults to user local bin. And now it starts the actual installation, and that's it. So I should now be able to just invoke config server, for example, which is the symbolic link to the configuration server, see what happens. And that comes right up. And here's one thing that we don't want in here. So it's currently listening on address 127.0.0.1 port 5841, which is the local port, or local host rather. So the reason we don't want that is because the configuration server also exposes the web user interface, which we want to invoke from another machine. So we have to make the configuration server accessible from other addresses outside of this machine. So we will change that in a minute. Let's just cancel execution of the configuration server. Let's see whether the reactive engine comes up. Reactive engine. So this starts one reactive engine, which, because it's alone, pretty much forms a cluster with itself, if you will. Had you two reactive engines running with the right ports configured and everything, and they could find each other, they would form a reactive cluster of two engines, and so forth. So let's see. This looks pretty good. Here we have the same issue, however. Here we have, by default, it's just listening to localhost here, and we want to change that so that the reactive engine can be reached from outside of this Linux machine. This is easily adjusted. For now, let's just hit Control-C and cancel this process. So now we know both the configuration server and reactive engine are running in principle. All we want to do is change some minor configurations. Let's just wait until this terminates. Okay, here we go. So I am already in my user directory, and let's see what we have here. So here we now have a directory called, it's hard to see, but anyway, I'll tell you, which is called .layline. This directory doesn't exist after installation, but it does exist after you have started the configuration server and or the reactive engine at least once. Okay, and in here we can now find configuration files which are specific to this installation. Okay, and starting these instances of the configuration server and the reactive engine. Let's take a look. So I will cd into the .layline directory. Take a look. There we have two directories now, config server and reactive engine. I'll go into the config server directory, and again, here we have a couple of directories: clusters, config, database, log, project, security, and so forth. What we want to look at is the config directory in here. Let's see what's in there. And there we have a file called application conf. So we want to VI into the application conf directory here, file rather. And here at the top we have a section, an empty section, layline. And this is where we want to add a few entries. Okay, it's pretty simple. Just I'll see you through this. So first thing we'll do is we'll add a section called config server, since we are now changing the application conf file for the config server. Config server, close this bracket, and in here we'll add a section called REST server. Okay, and in there, we'll add a section called bind. Oops, bind. And in here, we'll add a property called hostname, which equals 00000. So what this will do is this will ensure that we can now, the configuration server will accept connections from outside localhost. So from another machine, for example, which is exactly what we want if we invoke the configuration center through a browser from another machine. Okay, so now let's save this, write this to disk and quit. And now let's restart the configuration server and see whether this has actually worked. Okay, so this has started the configuration server just by invoking the symbolic link config server. And here we can now see it's listening on 0005841, which is exactly what we want. So now we'll send this process to the background. So hit Control Z and BG for background. So this sends it to the background. Let's see whether this job is running in the background. Yep, I've got the config server running in the background. So now we'll do exactly the same configuration change to the reactive engine. So I'm just going to head over to the reactive engine config directory. Okay, so which is 2 directories up from where we are, now into reactive engine and config directory. And in here, we should also have an application conf file now for the reactive engine. So let's VI into that. And up here at the top, we again have an empty ley line section, which is where we will add a few entries as well. So I have prepared this here, and I'll just paste this in here. So it's very simple. So we have, instead of a config server section, now we have a reactive engine section, and then the rest is the same as in the config server application.conf file. So REST server bind host name 0000 and all the closing brackets, and we're good to go. Write this to disk and quit. And now let's start the reactive engine. And if we did the right thing, this should now also listen to 00000 instead of localhost. So let's start the reactive engine by invoking the symbolic link. So the reactive engine comes up. And it's the REST server is listening on address 00000, which is exactly what we want. Okay, great. So now let's send that to the background. Control Z, BG for background. See, 2 jobs we should be running, the config server and the reactive engine. And now, since we have the configuration server started, the reactive engine, one reactive engine started, we should be able to invoke the configuration center web user interface. So how do we do that? So we have to kind of know, how we can address the Linux machine from the outside. So I just happen to know that I can address my machine through this URL, ubuntu.org.local. So this points to my Linux machine, and then here's the port that we have accepted upon installation, 5841. And let's just go with that. So ubuntu.org.local :5841. So that should bring up the configuration center web user interface, and there it is. So the first thing it does is ask me to log in. We have a super secret username and password combination, which goes by admin. So we'll try that. Yeah, and that worked. Now it tells you login successful, and here in the top right corner, it also says config server. I'm logged in as admin. Okay. So now we want to also check whether the reactive engine is running, and we can actually see that from the configuration center here. Obviously, if we go over to this operations tab here, which we already are, and usually we should be able to select that here. So which cluster do we want to look at? So this is empty upon initial installation. So we first have to let the system know where it can find the reactive cluster / the engines that we want to look at here. So we go over to settings, and in settings on the left hand side we find configuration server, and here cluster storage. So this is where you can define all the individual clusters that you may want to work with. So in our case it's just one, but as you do more and more work with Leyline IO, you add more clusters that you want to connect to here. So here on the right hand side it shows me which clusters I have configured. Currently there's none, so I'll just hit plus here, and it brings up a dialog. So I'll say this is my Linux cluster that I just created. Just give it a name that you like, and down here add bootstrap node. So you can add one or more bootstrap nodes. So for example, if you have a cluster with 5 engines running, you could add 3 of them here as bootstrap nodes, or just one, or all 5. It's really up to you. In our case, we only have 1 engine running, so that would also be our bootstrap node. So here, I'm just going to change the URL here, and that is ubuntu.org.local:5842, which is again one of the ports that we accepted upon default installation. So I'll hit OK here. So that has created this cluster setting, and now I can go back to operations, and here I should now be able to pick that Linux cluster which we just created, and this will again ask me to log in with our super secret default password, admin. Don't tell anybody. Alright, so now we're also logged into not just into a configuration server, but also into a reactive cluster here. And we can also, of course, just log out of the cluster and stay logged into the configuration server. So these are two fundamentally different things, login wise. So here I can see the one node that we have set up on that machine, and this is really just to show that this node can be reached and it's up and running and all that. So the node is a Leyline version 2.11. A couple of technical parameters here, such as what's the total memory, free memory, maximum memory capacity on that machine, for the Java virtual machine which is running the engine, and so forth. So this really concludes the demo on how to install Leyline IO on Linux, and how to check whether everything is up and running and working fine. Feel free to look at the documentation. Again, it's at doc Leyline IO, and you should find all the installation instructions here on how to get up and running. If you don't want to look at me talking in a video, but rather read this. Other than that, should you run into any issues during the installation process, feel free to contact us at support@Leyline.io. We're very, very happy to help you with your installation and get you up and running. And if you have a tricky environment, just holler, and we'll be more than happy to dive into your environment together with you and get you up and running in no time. All right, well, thanks a lot, and talk to you soon in the next video. Bye-bye.